All right, good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call to order the Monday, October 21st, 2024 City of Charleston Committee on Real Estate meeting to order. Councilmember Greg, would you please give us the invocation?
Let me just do a brief moment of silence, please. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I understand the minutes are deferred and we'll be receiving those at our next meeting. So we'll go ahead and get into the agenda. Can I entertain a motion to take A and B pertaining to 3 Lockwood Drive together?
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved and properly seconded to take the first 2 items together. Ms. Dinwiddie, do you mind giving us the 10,000 feet on this one? This has been before the committee before, but it's back and improved.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. As this committee may recall, on the last real estate committee meeting, this item was on the agenda and it was deferred at that time. Just to give a little bit of background, this has to do with a lease agreement between the city and Charleston Marine Holdings for the building located at 3 Lockwood Drive. This building is leased under a ground lease that was entered into in 1985. The lease agreement is going to terminate in April 30th, 2027. There are currently no remaining renewal options on that lease agreement. What we're requesting is for Charleston Marine Holdings to have the ability to assign this lease agreement to Safe Harbor. Safe Harbor currently leases and operates and manages the city marina and the parking lot located at Lockwood Drive. Under the proposed amendment that's before the committee, there's really 2 main parts that's happening. The first main part is to add some extensions to that lease agreement. It's a total of 20 years of extensions with 4 optional renewal periods of 5 years each. That would, if they were all exercised, that would bring the agreement from 2027 through 2042. Under the proposed amendment, during that first 5-year option period, the rent would continue at an annual increase of 3%. However, in the 4th, 5th, and 6th option periods, the rent would increase to fair market value at each one of those renewal periods. This is different than what was previously proposed to committee under the prior version. It was only going to increase at the second 10-year period. So here we have it increasing at the 4th, 5th, and 6th option periods. That would be effective regardless of whether or not this lease is assigned to Safe Harbor. The second portion of this 4th amendment would only be effective if this is assigned to Safe Harbor. And under this second portion of this amendment, what we've put into place are provisions to address the relocation of the improvements in the event the barrier extension project would materially affect this building. We did go back to the parties and we revised the language so that now the city has control over the determination as to whether or not the barrier extension project would have a material impact on the leased premises. If the city determines that it is an immaterial impact or no impact whatsoever, then the improvements would not be relocated. If, however, the city determines that the barrier extension project would have a material impact on that leased premises, meaning it affects the building or it reduces the number of parking spaces or it affects the utilities or their ordinary course of business, if it's determined that there's a material impact on those matters, then Safe Harbor would have the option at the city's approval to relocate those improvements to elsewhere on the Safe Harbor leased property. The provisions for the relocation of the improvements match exactly the same provisions that were previously approved by committee and council in the variety store amendment that was heard, I believe, at the last committee and council meetings. So I know that that is a lot going on here, but this is something that we've discussed in the past at committee. So I'm going to just kind of pause there and answer any questions that you guys might have. I believe that we also have a representative of Safe Harbor in attendance who can answer any specific questions that committee may have about this proposed amendment.
If I may, Mr. Chair, just to sum it up, there were a lot of concerns on this one, especially 3 Lockwood, very legitimate concerns about the city getting not a great financial deal. I think a lot of that has been remedied, even though we could allow the lease to expire and just take the property over. I think giving it I think it's a net difference of about 2 or 3 years. Is that correct? Ms. Dinwiddie, on before it goes to market rate?
Yeah, 5 years, Mr. Mayor.
That because from 27?
So from 2022 through 2027 is what they currently have. That would stay at the same rate. Then the first 5-year extension, 2027
Would be
through
3%.
2032 would be 3%.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
So while that still would be well below market, I think one of the things that we need to take into consideration that hadn't really been discussed is that 3 Lockwood does need a lot of work. So if we took it over, it would, and you kind of amortized in what our upfit cost would be to get the market rate in 27. I think we're shaking out to a pretty good financial place by just allowing the additional 5 years below market with a 3% bump and then going to market rate. So try to take everything into consideration. Also, the fact that Safe Harbor is a good tenant and they are looking at doing some pretty substantial renovations to our assets. I think this is a good resolution of the concerns that were previously addressed.
Right. Councilmember Gregg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Dinwiddie. I guess I've still got some concerns about this one. Obviously, Mr. Mayor mentioned this is below market and it'll stay below market rate for till 2032. I'd consider this if we saw what kind of capital upgrades were going into that, and we could see a detailed financial proposal of what capital upgrades would be included. But this is a very this is like a multi-billion-dollar corporation, or at least a multi-hundred-million-dollar corporation. I just don't see why the taxpayers of Charleston should be subsidizing this. In addition to that, we looked at the subleases, and I appreciate staff for getting us this information. But Safe Harbor is renting this space out at, on average $20 a square foot. We're going to charge them $7.70 a square foot. So they're making $13.30 a square foot, or sorry, $16.30 a square foot just on arbitrage here. That just doesn't seem right to me. And doesn't sit right that they're making a profit on this below market rate. So I would say that they could either adjust their tenants down, or we should at least be charging them what they're charging their tenants. Thank you.
Yeah, I think doing a financial analysis, and maybe we can look at that. But to your point, the $16 delta, I think, is covering the upgrades that they're going to be making amortized in. And I do think there is some payment, I'm sure, to the current property owner to buy out the lease. I don't know what that number is, but they've been there for a long time, and they've I think been there for almost 40 years. And I've met with them on a couple of different occasions, and kind of the what they went through with the city, I think is a compelling argument that I've probably gotten more intel on than the members of this committee just through the various meetings that I've had, but certainly understand the point you're making, Councilman Gregg, and appreciate the financial prudence. I think this is an attempt at a compromise. If we want to get more detail, certainly can do that.
I see Councilmember Waring has his hand up, followed by Councilmember Tinkler.
I think Tinkler had his up before mine, so go ahead. I'll wait. Thank you.
Well, I know Mr. Sutherland's on the call. I don't know if he has any idea what the proposed improvements are going to be. I don't know if that will help.
Yeah, this is Reeve Sutherland. Thank you, Mr. Tinkler. Good to see you again. Yeah, Councilman Gregg, I think the building as it stands now needs upkeep, and we're willing to put some money into that for sure. However, to think that would be this building in its current state would be comparable to other Class A office spaces in Charleston, I think's just not quite apples to apples. Not to mention the parking lot right there needs some drainage work. I'm not sure if y'all been around there the last couple of days, but so we'd be willing to work on that infrastructure as well as Mayor Cogswell and his, barrier extension project or battery extension project kind of come into play there. I think there would be basically, long story short, there's two phases of improvements to this property. One would be kind of a short-term one. Second would be maybe a larger redevelopment further down the line here once we get some clarity as to where that wall is going to lie and how we can help activate that side of the peninsula. I mean, it's pretty clear we're putting a bunch of money into the waterfront aspect right now, and we'll continue to do so. We probably have another year or two of the new megadock and the redevelopment of the interior slips. But this property is very important to our marina members, both transient and local. And it also is important to kind of the west side of town there. I mean, a lot of those nearby neighborhoods use the wine shop. There's offices there for boat brokers that support our membership. And we need to keep it that way. There's divers, there's North Sails. It's a really good mixture that's taken a long time to get to. And we just want to make sure that we're able to keep that mixture so that it benefits both the neighbors and our boaters. In terms of the improvements, I mean, we haven't engaged with an architect or a firm to do that yet because we don't own the lease. So that would probably be something certainly we would be doing in the first couple of years of ownership, and then allocate those funds, and at that point we're up at market rate.
I did understand, just if I may, I mean, there is deferred maintenance, and particularly on the elevator, or is that coming from my staff, not your staff? I can't remember.
The elevator, I mean, I think there's some interior upfit as well. Mr. Dodds is on the call here, Peter, so he might be able to speak on that in more detail than I would.
Anyway, I think we can get an assessment of it. And I don't mean to, Mr. Chairman, I defer back to you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sutherland, for that additional information. Councilmember Waring?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two things. Should this relocation occur, Ms. Dinwiddie, who pays for that?
Yes, sir. If the relocation occurs, the Safe Harbor would be responsible for the cost of all permitting, all construction, and the demo of the building, unless it is the utilities that would be part of our demo as part of the project. as part of the barrier extension project, but they would be responsible for the cost of all the construction.
All right, good, because I think the last piece, we had some responsibility with that. And then that first part, remember when this lease was entered into, that was before Charleston Place was even done. Okay, it was certainly before Hugo. Okay, that was a different Charleston. Probably 8 out of 10 houses in Charleston at that time needed renovating. So it was a reason for the city to, create great incentives on this. So I thank you all for reworking this lease. But I do believe at the end of the current lease, it needs to go to market rate. Now, how do we determine that market rate? What's the benchmark to determine that market rate? I agree with the gentleman that just spoke. This isn't Class A space to the point of, what we tend to think Class A would be. It's good space, but maybe not Class A. So Mr. Sutherland said that, and that kind of resonated, but I do think it needs to go to current market rate. I'm at the end of the current lease. It's only been 40 years at below market, substantially below market rate. That's all it's been. Almost 40 years. So those are two items. The first one has been answered by Ms. Dinwiddie. And the second one, I think you tweak it, and at the end of the current lease goes the current market rate.
Okay. Councilmember Bowden, you had some comments?
Yeah, just two quick questions. The first being, so we talked about that now the city makes the determination of whether it's it's the battery extension project, if it materially affects the lease. If they disagree, do we just end up in litigation?
Good point.
I'm trying to recall the provision in here if we can't agree on that. And I believe that the original lease would say that it would go to court to be decided, but I can double check on that for you guys right now.
Mediation or litigation?
That's what I'm pulling up the original lease right now, Mr. Mayor.
Or perhaps even arbitration.
Yeah.
We'll find out. We'll find out soon enough. But no, that's a good thought.
And then I guess while she's looking that up, so I think I understand the point of asking for the below market rent, but would that be us covering the full cost of improvement there through reduced rent, or is that does that work out to us covering 50% through a reduced rent and the other party covering the other 50%, or how do the numbers shake out there?
I think of it, if you just think about it simply, if there's a roughly a $10 delta between market rent and what they're paying, and I believe it's about 10,000 rentable square feet of heated and cooled above the, and so that's about $160,000, or no, about somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000. It's $10 delta, right? And then do that over 5 years. That's 500. You could discount that back. I think the improvements that are ultimately going to be needed to be made on that property are going to be somewhere between 250 and $1 million. It's a old building that's nearing the end of its ground lease. So I think having a financial analysis wouldn't hurt, but I do think we don't have a lot of money sitting around to renovate the building, to sink into it, to get our money back after 5 or 6 years. So again, we can take a deeper dive into it, guys. I'm all for being financially prudent. But this is where we have kind of a bird in hand and a good tenant with a good mix and a good programming, and a tenant that's been there and been a good tenant. And I totally respect Councilman Waring's point too, that, This has been 40 years, and Charleston was a very different place there, but these have also been good tenants. So it's just a balancing act on where we want to go. And I think that this is a reasonable solution. We might tweak it a little bit based on a detailed financial analysis on the upfits that may or may not be needed, and how you define market rate for this type of building and that mix of tenants. But I don't think we're going to shake out in too much of a different place, if I had to guess.
To answer y'all's question, in the original lease agreement, if there's any disputes, either party has the option to bring an action in law or equity before the court to determine. So I would imagine this would be a declaratory judgment if needed, if not litigated.
Good deal.
Thank you.
Thanks for running that down. Councilmember Gray?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I guess at this point, you know, here where I am is we've got there are tenants in there right now that are subleasing at, you know, average roughly $20 a square foot. I mean, to me, that sort of establishes what the market rate rent of that building is. That's what customers are willing to pay. And so to me, you know, I would support this if we would adjust the market rent in 2027 at the end of the current term. And then, you know, in 2032, we can readjust as well with the 3% escalator. But in the form it is now, I'm gonna vote no on this one.
I see Mr. Sutherland's got his hand up. You want to be recognized now?
Well, I just wanted to say that, you know, the current ownership group built that building too, and I don't know if that was clear to everybody, and have maintained it. So, you know, the fact that it's below market rent on a ground lease, of course, over 40 years, they would have recouped their build costs. But, you know, as the mayor said, we're paying them for this lease. And so we will want a little bit of time to make improvements, which the discounted rent will do. And then after 8 years from today, basically, we'll be at market rate. But the rent that the occupants are paying is important, because not all these tenants can go pay, you know, the highest rent in town. It's not, they're not your average office lessees, wanted that to be clear. And so to lose them for, you know, a law firm or a dentist practice or someone that could just pay higher rents really degrades the use of that building as an amenity to the marina and, you know, that kind of west side. So I just wanted to be clear there. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. Councilman Bowden?
All right, last question this time. So you might understand that if we did not extend this on these terms and we just said, well, let's, you know, put it back out at the expiration of this current lease, would we then be on the hook for, you know, every dime of the improvements that are needed before we put it back out?
We would in all likelihood need to do renovations to it to get market rate. I mean, or it would be a continued discounted rate, and maybe you could keep doing a ground lease or something like that. I mean, so there are a lot of different variables here, but if this was a private entity like Safe Harbor, they're going to do renovations to the building to, you know, make sure that they have long-term viability of it. And to Reeves' point, this is somewhat of a unique situation in that it's not all market rate, and you got a sale maker in there. I mean, they're not going to go pay office rent, so it's kind of a hybrid amenity type structure. And that's where I say, I mean, we could do a pretty deep financial dive on this and try and take all those variables into account. And we might come out a couple of dollars here or there, you know, better off for the city. It might be worse off for the city. I don't really know. But I think this is, again, just given the fact that the original tenants built the building, they've maintained it for 40 years. It's been, they went through Hugo, they went through the marina being closed 6 years where they almost went bankrupt. And again, these are stories that I've gotten from Mr. Dobbs and others that have come in and spoken with me. And I think this is just in an effort to really try and balance out that and the needs of Safe Harbor with, you know, being financially responsible for the city of Charleston as well, which again, I totally respect Councilman Boyd's, Greg's perspective, as well as Councilman Waring's, and understand where they're coming from. I, however, you know, intend on voting for it.
Yeah. And, you know, I might just point out here that there's no shortage of bad real estate deals in the city of Charleston. Maybe, you know, you can't throw a rock around here without hitting one. I would say that while perhaps what's before us today is not full on, you know, the maximally negotiated fair market deal, it definitely moves the needle in that direction considerably. And we will be in a place soon where it'll be fair market rent. There's just more like a transition period under this framework before us today, as opposed to just a complete hard stop and switch over to something a little bit more, you know, you would expect in the private sector. So for that reason, thinking it through in those terms, that's how I've gotten to be comfortable with it. Councilmember Waring, Councilmember Tinkler, I didn't see whose hand went up first.
I think it was me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Listen, I'm just about there with you guys too, but am I right in thinking that it's going to be 8 years before any reasonable increase comes under the current situation? See, I just think at the end of the we've already taken care of the piece that if the perimeter wall affects it, that cost is not going to be passed on to the taxpayer. So again, that was a big hurdle for me. But you're talking about the better part of a decade before we see any increase in current rents? So that's the portion that needs to be tweaked. You still got the remaining portion that we have to live with that we agreed to. So we, you know, owning up to our words on that. Some sort of increase ought to come into being after.
Wait, again, it would be 3% for that 5-year period. So it's a net 5 years at 3%. The difference between an increase of 3% and what the market rate would be in exchange for them doing the renovations and upfit that would be needed versus us doing it. So time value of money, net present value. I mean, it might shake out to their, but it's not as clean as just that delta in rent.
Okay. They pay property taxes?
No, because it's a city-owned property. But that's a pass-through to the tenant anyway. But these are triple net leases.
So if it's a pass-through to the tenant, we don't get any property taxes?
Well, it's city-owned property.
Come on, man.
All the marina is. I mean, it's still in long-term leases. Yeah.
Well, Councilman Appel, you're right. A lot of these city leases leave a lot to be desired. Now, it's not this current administration, actually not even the previous administration's fault. But at some point in time, they need to be corrected. Now I'm looking for a lot of
Mayor Riley had the paddles in the hospital, and he was putting it on the body, and he was trying to shock the city into action.
And it is alive right now. So
mission accomplished, right?
Mission accomplished. That's right.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Tinkler.
Well, I saw Ms. Dinwiddie put her hand up. I don't know if she had something to say first in response.
Sorry. I was going to respond to Councilmember Waring's question about the rent increases. We are under annual 3% rent increases through the current lease termination, which would be 2027. So 3% increase all the way through 2027. This amendment would add the 4 5-year terms. During the first 5-year terms, it would continue at the 3%. And then it would increase at fair market value in 2032.
Thank you.
So my question, kind of listening to some of the concerns about this, there seems to be some concern about the, whether or not this rent or under market rent is necessary. I don't know if there's a way we can restructure it in a more certain way by maybe doing an abatement of rent for a period of time rather than a reduction in rent. Is that something that the committee would consider?
I'm not sure that it would help. I mean, I think it's still just net what the take to the city is what the concern that I think Councilman Waring and Councilman Greg have, but I'll let them.
Well, I guess my point is, an abatement that would be somewhat commensurate with what the city would ultimately have to invest if we were to let the lease expire and then try to bring the property up to market rent, because that's what it sounds like they're attempting to do.
Yeah, again, I think what we're arguing over here is somewhere around, $200,000 delta between what the 7-year difference in rent that we would get versus what we're getting now net having to build it out. And so does that equate to what is the net present value of that dollar amount, right? And I mean, I can do this in my Excel spreadsheet if we'd like and send it around, but it'll be close. I mean, depending on what the upfits ultimately end up being. And I do think in a wooden structure that hasn't had a lot of upkeep in the past couple of years, because this is towards the end of its ground lease, it could be substantial. I mean, it's a risk too, that we're not having to address, being the master landlord, if you would. So again, this is one I hear all the points. I just think that to Chairman Appel's point, this is one that does move the needle a pretty decent amount, coupling the risk and time value of money, and the other extenuating factors that we have a good tenant, we have a good ground lease lessor. It's been there for 40 years, over potentially $0 to $200,000, I think is not insignificant, but balance the risk on it.
Mr. Sutherland, would you like to be recognized again?
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to be clear that, we're acting kind of on behalf of Charleston Marine Holdings in going after this extension, but should we not purchase the property, it's my understanding, and Peter could speak up here if he wants, that this current ownership group will still want an extension. So that process will have to play out, whether it's us or them, frankly. That's all I would say.
Got it. All right, thank you. Well, I think we have definitely covered the waterfront on this one. Can I entertain a motion from anybody on the committee to
I think did I make a motion to take A and B together? I think I need to withdraw that motion, and I would say move for approval on item A.
Okay. We've got a motion on the floor to approve item A. Motion seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none.
Wait a minute, discussion. You sure you don't want to try to tweak that first period after, I mean, we're just about there on this one. You sure you don't want to tweak that rents after it matures? I mean,
On the market rate after it
or some modicum above 3%. I mean, I think the rest of them we could live with. I think we like at the 10-yard line on this one, maybe even the 5-yard line.
What if I were to make the motion that it at the end of the term, it increases by 10% and then 3% annually. So it goes up 3% from where it is right now annually, and then goes up 10. And then for 5 years, that first term, it goes up 3% and then goes to market rate based on an appraisal.
That's better than we got right now. Mhm.
I'll make that motion. I'll amend my motion for approval on that. And I think that's again, a reasonable compromise.
Right. Councilmember Boyd?
Are you calling me, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
I mean, I just think, I'd have to look at the numbers with, I can't do all this math in 2 seconds in order to vote on this. I feel like I need to do some due diligence before I can vote on something. I mean, this is, later in this agenda, we need to spend somewhere around $15 million or, $14 million. I just think, it's incumbent on us to kind of do our homework on this one, and I feel like I need to do a little bit more analysis before I could vote on this in this amended form that Mayor Cogswell just proposed. So I'd like another time to be able to do some financial analysis here.
Councilmember Bigler?
Yeah, well, the motion is on item A, right, which is just the assignment, correct?
Correct.
But amending the term would be on item B, right?
That would be the case.
Yeah, that's true.
So should we just move, see if we can get a vote on item A first and then?
That's a good point. I move for approval on item A.
Second.
All right, moved and properly second on item A. Any comments or questions? Councilmember Waring?
Man, which one we debating right now? I was still on the last motion.
Well, the financial side is on B. The financial side is on B. This is just the assignment. That's what, good point on Councilman Tinkler catch.
Okay, yeah, I'll vote on that, yeah.
All right, we'll call for a vote. All in favor of the assignment, please signify support by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Now on to item B. It doesn't look like this is coming up on Ways and Means tomorrow or real estate. It doesn't seem like there's an exigency. I would just throw out there instead of.
Yeah, I'm gonna move for approval, move to defer.
Okay.
Okay,
We'll work on a financial analysis and get that. I think that's a fair point. We can do that pretty quickly, I think, and work with Safe Harbor and Mr. Dobbs on that and circulate that to the group.
Thank you for that.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Sounds good. We're getting to the right place here. So the mayor's got a motion to defer item B. Did I hear a second?
I seconded it.
Okay, Councilmember Waring seconded the motion to defer. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Appreciate everybody's time on this. I think this discussion on this item, as well as the Marina Variety Store, it's moving it in a positive direction every time we meet and talk about it. And like Councilmember Waring said, we're very close, and we want to be good partners with Safe Harbor and the current tenant, and we'll get there. Next item is a proposed development agreement amendment with respect to Magnolia over on Upper Peninsula. Ms. Creech?
Yes, I have this one. This amendment would do 4 things. First, it would extend the lease to the city for the CPW property to July 31st of 2026. Second, it would call for the construction of a flood wall on the open space to be approved by the city in terms of location and design, and that would be maintained exclusively by the Master Property Owners Association via a recorded covenant. Third, it adds a parcel to the property that's known as the Parker parcel. And fourth, it would, excuse me, it would extend the term of the agreement 10 years from the effective date of the amendment. As far as the timeline goes, this would come to council for a first reading on the 12th. It would go to Planning Commission on November 20th and come back to council for a second reading and a public hearing on December 17th. Please let me know if you have any questions about it.
Great, thank you so much. Can I entertain a motion to approve this item?
So moved.
All right,
Second.
moved and properly seconded. Any comments, questions from the committee? All right, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Next item up is in connection with Johns Island Park. This is a approval to authorize the mayor to execute an agreement for improvements pertaining to a couple of ball fields over there. Melissa?
That's
Get a
me.
motion on the floor. Move for approval.
Move for approval. Yeah, second.
All right. Moved and properly seconded. You want to give us some background on this one?
Sure.
Thank you.
So this is been a long time coming. They have actually started work on this, but this is improvements that CCSD is making on the Johns Island fields 1 and 3. And as soon as I can figure out how to share my screen with the big green button, I will. So they are redoing fields 1 and 3, a softball field and baseball field. They're putting in new plaza, new batting cages. They're doing some stormwater improvements, a sound barrier here, lighting, some fencing, batting cage, I said batting cages, press box renovations, and additional parking. And so this is just the agreement for the improvements. It is not the use and maintenance agreement. That's one we're working on separately. This is just the agreement for them to do the things.
Good deal. All right. Any comments or questions from the committee? Right. Call for a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Thank you. All right. Can I entertain a motion to take E and F together? I think they both.
So moved.
Same thing.
Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All right. Any opposed? The ayes have it. And then can I entertain a motion to take both of these up?
I'd move for approval on these two, and I'm happy to give a brief overview.
Right,
Second.
Okay, moved and properly seconded. Mayor, take it away.
Sure. These are the two parcels that we discussed. I can't remember if it was an executive session or not, but to relocate or to move the fire training facility over to off of Beast Fair, at the intersection of Beast, at the Circle, West Ashley Circle. And it's two parcels. One, they're both technically owned by Whitfield. One is under contract with an apartment developer. So we're buying out the assignment. We've worked with our attorneys to figure out a simultaneous closing. We have vetted this with the contractor, civil engineers, that we can fit our programming there. It also includes about a 60-acre tract across Glen McConnell that can be used for future mitigation. That would also, if we wanted to utilize those mitigation site, we could get more high ground out of the acreage that we're building on. So in a phase 2, if you will. I think it's a really good location for this. And if you'll recall the presentation we gave on the city ops building by not building a parking deck, we end up with a decent amount of savings that would allow us to buy this property and build the facility and add to the facility some command offices for fire at this location, and still be at or below the previous city ops budget, which the city ops had fire training there too. So I think it's a good plan. Fire department seems very supportive of it. I think it also blocks 300 apartments in low area. And like I say, financially, this is one where I think we're going to come out on top, and I can recirculate the analysis that I presented, but it's about right now it looks like about a $5 million cushion that we would have that would end up in the positive from where we were on the city ops budget.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Gregg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I get, had we bonded against that project on the existing ops facility?
Yeah. So right now there's a $55 million bond, a TIF bond that will be fully utilized on the fleet at the site on the neck. And then the funding source for the balance, which is I think a $60 million issuance, was going to be a GO bond to pay for the fire training. And so all we're doing is keeping the 55 there, and then the 60 would go over to West Ashley versus being on the neck.
So I'm correct in saying we wouldn't be borrowing any additional money or bonding any additional dollars to do these essentially two separate projects than one combined project.
We would be in all likelihood borrowing less.
Okay. So we have, sorry, on the $60 million, we haven't gone to the bond market on that yet.
No.
On
In either cases.
But we would, would we be going to the bond market to purchase this property and then, or do we have?
I can't remember how I think we may have funding to bridge the acquisition, but I'll leave that to Amy. Was this being contemplated?
We would be using the bond to purchase the land for that.
We would be. Okay.
Okay.
So we would do an issuance then.
So whatever the purchase price of this land is in the bond, are we going to do one bond for the whole facility plus the land, or separate bonds for? I mean, we don't know what the building facility is going to cost yet, right? So
we have a pretty good idea because they've already designed it, and it's basically being split up. So there may be a 6-month gap between where we were versus where we are. But so I think it would, and I mean, Amy, you tell me, but I think it would probably be one issuance.
We would prefer to do one issuance, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's all my questions.
All right. I see Councilmember Tinkler and Waring have their hands up. I didn't see who's went up first.
Tinkler was up first. Councilman Tinkler was.
Right.
We like to raise our hands at the same time.
Oh, okay.
I guess since we're looking at a completely different location now, I mean, does that, and we're talking about general obligation bonds, but does this potentially open up other sources of revenue or funds for this kind of site? Because I guess one of the purposes of this site is going to keep it natural, right? Is there any way we can find funds other than general obligation bonds?
Probably for improvements to like trails or what have you through the property that won't be built on. I mean, because again, we're building on about 10 acres of the 50 or 60 some odd acres. And then there's an easement through with the power line. So I think Greenbelt funds could be used for that sort of stuff. But in terms of just locking down the contract, I think we want to have the one bond issuance for the construction and and acquisition.
Councilmember Waring.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank all involved with this. The mayor certainly rethinking capital projects, and Ms. Wharton and her financial team, because that parking garage was just, man, that was so expensive to put that parking garage there. And again, pushing back and maybe looking at it again. This is just a wonderful solution for us all. Got more land. I mean, the apartment piece, I get that, but we got more land to spread out for future needs of the city, and just dollars being spent much more efficiently. So,
oh, one other thing, if y'all recall that presentation we gave too, just to complement capital projects more, is that we also have really enhanced the design of both the fire training and fleet, where you're going to have a lot more natural light. It looks a lot less industrial. It's a much more attractive building that I think, for our employees, that makes a difference too. So
yeah, I did have one last question. Does this Mr. Kong, Jason Konsberg and his team over in the Coca-Cola building, does this give them another place to go as well? Will they be a part of this?
They weren't part of that original programming at the city ops facility. We are considering other options there, but no, Councilman Waring, they would remain where they are right now.
Okay.
And this would be fleet, and I think police radio and sign up at on the neck area, and then over here would be fire, and we would add some office space to fire for the center.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any further comments, questions? Councilmember Gregg, you got anything?
Nope.
This one seems like it's like Councilmember Waring said, a very well thought out matter. A lot of homework has been done prior to this coming on our agenda here, and it'd be a pretty significant investment in West Ashley here, and a statement that the city of Charleston is going to have a major presence over in West Ashley. So if there's no further comments or questions, I'll call for the vote on items E and F. All in favor of both items, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Okay. Let's see. Looks like items G and H both pertain to the same matter. It's a parking lease for the Hyatt Hotel. Can I entertain a motion to take both of those together?
Go move.
Second. Wait, these are not the same. G is the EB White building, the final form of that purchase and sale. Or maybe I'm looking at an old, I think I'm looking at an old agenda. I'm sorry.
Matt, is G and H?
I'm looking at an old agenda.
Okay, gotcha. So I think we've got a motion to take them both together. Can I entertain a second?
Second.
All right, moved and properly seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Now can entertain a motion to get this one on the floor.
Go move.
Moved and properly
Seconded.
Second.
All right. Matt, can you give us the 10,000-foot view on this one?
Absolutely. So
Thank you.
Previously, the city and the developer of the Hyatt had an agreement where the developers donated the land for the Midtown Garage to be built. The city purchased and operates that garage. The city purchased it through a combination of taxable and tax-exempt bonds. because of how the city purchased it, it created the parking agreement that we did with the Hyatt. It complicated a little bit, in which it's a rolling 6-month parking agreement. The Hyatt Hotel is looking to sell their interest, and they are requesting a parking arrangement to protect that parking interest in the future. So there's kind of 2 documents in front of you. One is a parking agreement. The other one is a parking use agreement and a parking lease agreement. So what the parking use agreement does is it essentially allows the owner to have the first right of refusal, one, to use the parking garage, continue to use parking garage for its 300 spaces as contemplated now. But as long as the tax exempt bonds still exist, which will be paid off in 2030, that if the city moved to sell the garage, then they would have the first right of refusal to purchase the garage. After those tax exempt bonds are paid off, then the parking lease would be a springing lease, which would come into effect. It would create a 10-year parking agreement with 2 automatic 5-year renewals. So in total, you'd be looking at essentially what would be a 26-year parking agreement across the two documents.
All right. And this use agreement, I imagine, is important so they maintain their parking from a zoning compliance perspective. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. And I think it's just the ability to sell it as well, sell their interest. Obviously, the rolling 6 months, I think, is very concerning to
I see. I see. That makes sense. They want it to be a little bit more nailed down from a future perspective if someone's going to be buying this hotel. Got it. All right. Any comments or questions from the committee?
Well, let me ask this, Mr. Chairman. What's the advantage to the city? I mean, I understand why they need a longer term, but 26 years. What's the advantage to the city?
So I think I would say, Councilman Waring, in regards to that, is if you look at our other hotel parking agreements, Marion Square or Francis Marion, the Hampton, the Embassy over at Camden, and then all 3 of those agreements. Now, granted, we can go back to the conversation about the marina, the deals that Mayor Riley did. Those agreements are structured such that they're essentially in perpetuity in the event that the hotels stop being used for 60 consecutive months. As you know, the Cooper Hotel acquired the parking arrangements from the Ports Authority building, which essentially says as long as the garage exists, we'll provide parking. So essentially in perpetuity. Financially, I would say there probably isn't any different benefit than what exists today. The hotel, the garage is going to park who it's going to park for the hotel. But outside of that, the one difference I will say with this arrangement with the Hyatt developer was they donated the land to the city. It was about $1.4 million as a part of the original deal. That was the one benefit the city got originally in the transaction.
So when we bought it from them, the land cost wasn't in that price?
Correct. They donated the land to the city.
Okay. Good point.
Any other comments or questions from the committee? All right. Hearing none, I'll call for the vote.
I got one
Councilmember Tinkler.
I mean, I'm just kind of curious. Is this parking garage is being used for public parking in general as well?
Yes, sir. There's 400 spaces in this garage. There is always on hand a minimum of 100 publicly available spaces at all times.
And what is the purpose that the city owned this garage because of the tax exempt bonds and the requirement that we have ownership?
We weren't required to own it. I think we didn't have a parking garage higher up that area at that time. And it was just a deal that was done for the development to have the hotel come online and meet their parking zoning requirements at the time.
Okay.
Okay. Any further comments or questions from the committee? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor of items G and H, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Thanks, Matt. On to the final item before we get to the annexations. This is item I, an authorization for the mayor to execute an intergovernmental agreement with CCSD, and this is in connection with 75 Calhoun Street. Can I entertain a motion to get this one on the floor?
Move for approval.
I second get it on.
Moved and properly seconded. Mr. Mayor, do you want to cover this one or someone else be talking about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can have anyone from PFRC, or if Josh is on, he can chime in here. I don't know if Jeremy's on too, but this has been what we discussed as a council. The idea of is a condition for CCSD to fully participate in Union Pier, that we would agree to give up our leasehold interest in 75 Calhoun, and as well as the parking spaces that currently go with it. And so, it's a big condition on theirs to be willing to do it. And as we've discussed, it wasn't a hard thing for me to give up, just because I think it makes a lot of sense. And that building is, let's just say, not my favorite of the city's assets. The question then becomes, where do we put the folks that are in that 30,000 square feet? And we are working on that now. I think we have an interim solution with some temporary space, as well as some space on Meeting Street that we would be able to get people into on a longer term basis. And then ultimately, I think the idea, and this is for council to determine, but that we would build a facility or do a larger renovation on the Catholic property, the diocese property that we're working on across from Sumar Street. So that's kind of the general concept here. And happy to answer any questions or turn it over to Josh or anyone else who might give more detail.
Okay. Josh, you got anything you want to add on this one?
Just add that the moving out of 75 Calhoun will have to take place by the midpoint of next year. So as the mayor mentioned, this is all kind of time sensitive in terms of the path forward. Thank you.
Yeah, just to give a definition as to, it's 108 Meeting Street, where we would move some departments up there, and then the Wells Fargo space at the corner, and that would be on a longer term basis. We're looking at doing a long-term lease with the Historic Charleston Foundation. That's where the old gift shop used to be, and I think it makes sense for the city to take over that property and ultimately to own it, which we're working on them about. And then on a shorter term basis, like for a 3-year term, move into the Wells Fargo space, which has parking at the corner of Broad and East Bay, and it's move-in ready, and we could be in there pretty quickly. Again, it would be a temporary solution until we figured out a permanent location. Ideally, like I say, my thought would be to have it in West Ashley.
Got it. All right. Again, we've got 2 hands up, and I don't know who touched the.
It was Councilman Greg had his hand up.
Councilman Waring, you're being a Boy Scout today, I tell you.
No, he really had his hand up.
You could have easily taken these, all of these down. Councilmember Greg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, so just doing the quick math on this one. So 240 parking spaces. Those have a market rate of $160 per month per space. So that's like $460,000 roughly a year, I guess, in the parking spaces that we'd essentially be given the school district. Is that?
No, the school district continues to pay for those spaces. Those
Okay.
are- They have the ability to rent them at market rate.
Okay, so they're gonna rent them from us. We're not giving them the,
No.
okay, all right.
And that market rate can change from time to time. So whatever that market rate is, the city council decides for that garage is what they're not locking in a beneficial rate better
Okay.
than the market rate.
All right, I thought we were giving them the parking spaces. That makes me feel much better.
It's the use of up to the 240.
All right, great. And then I guess the other question is, what's our per square foot cost on 75 Calhoun right now? Roughly, like, do we have an idea?
Per square foot rent
Yes.
is 0.
Okay.
So basically, we're giving them let's think of it as a condo unit of that we're not paying, that we own, for lack of a better way of describing it. We own a leasehold interest in it.
Okay.
And that's the give for them to participate. And then we've talked about making up that difference in part with the port, and without getting into those details because it was done in an executive session, that's kind of the idea of getting compensated back for that.
Okay. As long as we have some assurances that we're going to get compensated on the back half, it just this makes me a little nervous. I mean, do we want to go ahead and do this now, or give a first reading and then hold it?
We need to get. I think
This is just the authorization.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
See, under our form of government, the mayor gets to execute the law. All right, I'm just kidding. We won't start that. Councilmember Waring. We won't start up with that. Councilmember Waring.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I as I said, let me be clear on my conflict on this. On this piece, I wanted to beat it. The part about the Catholic property, I knew it was coming to market, and I want the city to certainly have, hopefully, first crack at it. So I will not be voting on that, whether to buy or not, because I am conflicted on that. But on this piece, I do want to speak about it. But you mentioned some nuances, Mr. Matus. Now, I don't know whether it should be in executive session or not, but I guess the authorization, the part about what we get, I'm unclear on. And the part about the parking spaces, what's the relationship now? How many spaces are they using today?
they're
60.
So they're using 60.
No, 160.
160, and it's gonna go to 240?
Yeah,
Yes.
the 80, we have 80 spaces that go with the third floor. So basically we're transferring those over to them. It's no difference or change on what the parking is with our current staff on George Street. It literally is just, that's the parking that's associated with that third floor, and that's what they would get.
So what about after hours when the like the
It would
Gill
remain
emptied
the
out,
same.
the Gill Yard has a performance over there, and they rent it out for $5 or $10 or whatever it's going to be. Will that relationship change? Because that's a very profitable garage, and the garages are parking. Let's put it like this: it's ballparking, but I think it's getting pretty close to 15% of our overall budget. So I want to make sure we're going to be whole when it comes to parking.
Jeremy, is the lease, it's currently existing, is that 24 hours or is it office hours?
Yeah, it will be 24-hour spots, but I think the parking agreements for that garage typically can require folks to move to a different garage when there's a special event. But it will be 24-hour spaces. But
see, when we again after hours, and the Gill Yard has, I don't know, 1,500 people over there. Pretty nice to be able to park and go out and walk next door. So how does it? I don't want to interrupt that relationship, certainly.
there will eventually be a parking agreement where I think we could spell that out.
Yeah, I think that's solvable. I think you make a good point. I think that's solvable. I don't think they're
And
looking
also,
for it. Yeah.
And also, we had anticipated, Councilmember Waring, that we would also, if there's special events that are going to be there, that they would have to move to the aquarium garage.
For example, like Wildlife Expo when it comes.
That's correct.
All right. So authorization to go cut the deal, right? All right.
Bring back.
Okay.
Right. Any further comments or questions from the committee?
I'm glad they're painting the building. That's good.
Absolutely. I was talking with one of our school board members about the TIF, and I mentioned that just like education is an investment for the future, so is this. You know, it's not about what you put into the first grader today. It's about what that first grader is going to do decades down the road. So as y'all are talking amongst our colleagues over at the school district, keep that in mind. Let's call for a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Thank you, everybody. That concludes our, I guess, regular items. We're on to the annexation portion. We've got two annexations. One appears to be a, Councilmember Burton, go ahead.
I said move for approval.
So second.
Can we take both of them together?
Tinkler, you're on mute.
Tinkler, you're on mute.
Well, I'm gonna have to recuse myself from J1, so it may just be easier just to do both of them separately.
Okay.
That's
Move for approval on the first one.
second.
Moved and properly seconded. Molly, do you want to give us a little background on this one? And Councilmember Parker, this is in her district, and we've communicated a little bit this afternoon. And I see she's on the call, and I definitely want to make sure she's recognized and given an opportunity to speak. But maybe Molly, give us some background, and we'll turn it over to Councilmember Parker.
Sure, absolutely. So item J1 is the Folly Road parcel that is being annexed to support the adjacent Grimble Folly Road Townhome project in navigating their stormwater management process. This is an arrangement that legal counsel has been bringing us to this point. So if you have any more questions regarding the details of that, I feel like Magley's still here, so she'll be able to answer questions. But the second property is the standard residential annexation in the Melrose subdivision. So if anybody has any questions for me, I'll do my best to answer them. But if you've got anything for legal, they're here too, thankfully.
And also, if we want to get legal advice, everybody, I would just encourage us to avail ourselves of the opportunity to go into executive session for that. Councilmember Parker, do you want to be recognized at this time?
I would, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Of course, please.
Sure. Yes, and you said it perfectly. I would strongly advise the committee, I think we do need to receive a little more information regarding, the litigation and anything else involving this property before making any votes.
In that case, I move for deferment on this one till we get the opportunity to have that debriefing.
Okay. All right. We've got a motion to defer J1. Can I entertain a second?
I second it, yeah.
Okay. Moved and properly seconded. All in favor of deferral?
Aye.
We say
Aye.
aye. Aye. Any opposed?
I just recuse myself on that one.
Okay. Let's make sure to get Councilmember Tinkler the form to sign. You can do that tomorrow night.
Yes.
All in favor of the deferral? That's unanimous. Okay, the matter's deferred, and we'll regroup on that one.
Move approval on the Melrose annexation.
Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. That brings us to the close of our agenda. Appreciate everybody's thorough engagement today. We covered a lot of ground on some very important matters in the city, and appreciate staff and all of my colleagues for their engagement today. Unless there's anything else for the good of the order, we'll call it a real estate committee meeting and see everybody tomorrow night.
Good work, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Y'all take care.